You need to stop drinking your Starbucks and having an iPhone, because apparently having an Apple iPhone is what's going to keep you from having a home. Let's go ahead and get into it and some of the stuff that is sad to say now. It's getting worse with what we're doing. We're going into a midterm. And for someone who is conservative, it is very annoying to me to see how much we're trying to destroy ourselves before we go in the midterm. And I'm trying to find a happy balance where we can actually tell the truth and be able to reach those around us with some kind of compassion. I'm Caleb Smith, and this is the Tradesman Talk Show. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now, as you've seen, our channel has grown quite a lot recently, and I think it's because there's not a lot of real true balance out there, and there are so many people that it's like once an opinion is made, and it's on the left and on the right both, it's just everyone has to go down that opinion and dive into that way, and it's like sometimes that's not the best solution, and sometimes that's not even the right answer. So what am I talking about? And I was waiting for, again, I watch a lot of shows because I want to condense it for you. I want to be able to bring an opinion for you that is grounded from a balanced standpoint and from someone who's on the ground level in the trades, right? And so I was waiting to see what Glenn Beck was going to say, and honestly, I was kind of interested to see what he was going to say about Lindsey Clancy, and he didn't terribly dive into it too much today, nothing that I really wanted to post, but something that he did mention today, and I thought it was so wild because, I mean, we hadn't really strayed into this, but then it was something interesting because it tied into what I'd been hearing a lot from people like Ben Shapiro and so on. And he talks about the financial problems that we had. I remember I did a video on the burrito that broke the world, right? Because everyone was talking about how expensive the burrito was. Well, he has a take on it, and it's interesting how even he was very disconnected from his perspective on the burrito. And I actually did some research, but it was interesting. Sometimes you have to be careful what you search into AI because it doesn't always tell you the truth. Let's go ahead and get into it.
DoorDash, because
Here we go.
the people saying a burrito doesn't cost $20 are right about the burrito. A loaded steak burrito, I can't believe I'm coming back from a vacation and I'm doing this, runs $9 to $12 in most of the country. $17 in Manhattan, one of the most expensive places to live or eat in the world. Okay.
So what's funny is I asked AI and I said, okay, he's drawing the numbers and he's drawing random numbers and he's saying, what the cost of that burrito would be for, around America. And I thought it was interesting. So I asked it to give me a round number of different places, and I wanted a name for where it researched and what it found for those burritos. Like if I was like, I wanted to cost from a place in Colorado. I wanted to cost for, here, let me put this back over. A cost for the price in a different, in all these different states, right? And so what it came back with, and I can show it to you later. I just was trying to go through it. I can't find it, but the average that I had seen was $16 for a breakfast burrito. Not for breakfast burrito, but for a steak burrito, because that's the option that he gives, is a fully loaded steak burrito. And then I found one that was $10, but it says steak, but then when you look at the menu item, it listed as like eggs and that kind of thing. And so it's obviously clearly a breakfast burrito, which is different than a steak burrito, which is what this person was talking about. I live in California, and I'll give you a personal example. I love Farmer Boys. I went to Hog Heaven. The Hog Heaven, the burrito that they have is amazing, and I don't eat it right now because I'm trying to lose weight, so that is what it is. But when it originally came out, it was the expensive burrito. It was a few dollars more than what the normal burrito was, which was around like 10 something. And it came out at like 12 something, and that was just a few years ago. It is now already up to like $16.99 right now. If you're just a breakfast burrito that is called the Hog Heaven, it's delicious, by the way. And that's the cost of that burrito. So just take it with a grain of salt when he's saying that Manhattan, which is the most expensive place, is 17.
And that's if you put guacamole on it.
Guacamole.
20 is what it costs after DoorDash with the service fee and the delivery fee and the tip.
So I actually asked about that, and because I have used DoorDash, okay, many times it's like if I want to go out with my wife on a date or whatever, we have the kidnapper. Oh my goodness, the babysitter. Wow, watch our kid. Then we DoorDash in the food for our kid, so he's got his food, and we try to take care of the babysitter if we can. I mean, sometimes we have food prepared, but if we do and we don't have food prepared, whatever was happening, life happened, and we ended up door dashing it in. It's amazing. The same thing that you would buy normally is, say it's $16 for a burrito. You door dash it. It's now $18.99 because they add a markup on it. And then you have the $3, $4 delivery fee, and then you have the tip, and then you have the tax on top of it. So by the time you finish, it is not a $20 burrito. It is considerably more. And the average for that, I asked again, and I looked around at our area, and I was even looking on DoorDash myself. The average is actually more around the upper 20s for what would have normally been a $16 burrito. Believe it or not, it's insane.
Now, are you getting your burritos at DoorDash? Because that might be a problem.
And he says this, but this is funny. So again, and this is not a knock on Glenn. I love Glenn. He's done a lot of great things. But something that he was talking about is the whole thing started because a college student bought a burrito, and the burrito was $20. College students are stuck on usually college campuses, and so the prices are jacked up. They're way above normal. So I can understand him being upset. Yes, it is a problem that is the price. And if you're on college and you don't have a car, you're going to be door dashing. It's part of life. You can't help it. And so the fact that it is that expensive is very, very frustrating. And I know personally when I've been feeling really bad and not wanting to go do something, and I'll pull up something and be like, I just want to DoorDash something. And you look at the price and you're like, I'm not going to do it. I'll just go hungry. It's fine. And now, not everyone can make that choice. I mean, some people are hypoglycemic and stuff.
When somebody says my parents could afford a house and I can't, here's the part nobody says out loud. The house your parents bought is not the house you're looking at by any stretch of the imagination.
Sorry, he jumps from the burritos to the houses. And I kind of skipped a little bit here. You can look at the episode is from today if you have any questions about my clippings so that I'm not taking them out of context.
In 1973, the median new home in America was 1,525 square feet.
Now, here's a point that he's making, and he's making a point saying that what we're looking at back then for a house, and he talks about it in his podcast. He talks about the fact that he was looking at the houses in his neighborhoods from when he grew up and just how small they were and how tiny they were. And then he says, and now everyone wants a big house.
Fewer than half had air conditioning. 4 in 10 went up with one bathroom or a bath and a half, and that was for the full family. More people also lived in it back in 1973 than they do now.
Can I make a side note? Isn't it crazy? And I'll go full screen. Isn't it crazy that the time of life that you need to have a large house because you're going to have the most kids, you need the yard, you need everything else, is what you can't afford? It's kind of like the same thing, and I know this is just funny, and then again, there's no way to fix it, really, but it's the same thing like when you have bad credit and you're trying to get a car. And they're like, oh, you have bad credit? Well, we're going to make you pay more a month then. And you're like, well, right, I already can't afford the payment, but now you're going to make it even more expensive? Doesn't make sense, right?
Per household against about 2.5 today. Today's median new home is around 2,100 square feet. That's after builders shrank them. It's the smallest new home since 19...
The problem is, I want to mention this, he's conflating new home with new buyers' homes, meaning he's saying that the new builds that are going in are 2,100 square feet instead of the 1,500 square feet of back in the day. Right, but that doesn't mean that the people that are buying these houses that are new buyers are buying the 2,100 square feet. And we'll get into the AC in a second.
Since 2009, and it's still 40% bigger than it was in 1973. Okay, and nearly every one of them has central air. So the houses that you're looking at...
So when he keeps saying central air, I want you to understand, when you look at the average of what it costs to install an AC in a house, and if you're talking about a median house right now, which is about $400,000, $420,000 across America, it's a median house. The median cost to install AC, because it's being done as we go, it's installed with the building process, the median cost of that is $8,000. $8,000 on a $420,000 house is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of the house. So understand when he's saying this, and these older people are saying, "Oh, you just have one AC," and it's like, okay, sure, because if it's in a new build, the cost to ratio of house value, it doesn't make sense not to do it. Because it's not even that much more a month. It's like $40 more a month on your payment.
Are 40% bigger than the ones that your parents moved into, and they didn't have central air, and yours does.
And again,
For
that's Glenn. Again, that is if these people are buying these houses. There is not the data, and he doesn't have the data. In fact, he mentions the fact he doesn't have the data because he says it's different between new home buyers and home buyers in general. There's no data that says necessarily that the home buyers that are going into these 2,100 square foot homes are new buyers. And if they are, many of the new ones that are doing that are waiting, like he says, until they're 40 to go buy the house.
in 10 have 4 bedrooms or more. 3 in 10 have 3 bathrooms or more. Remember,
And again, when the median age for a new home buyer is 40 years of age, do you know what they have? Children. Because up to this point, you can't afford it. You're scrimping and saving, trying to make enough money to buy a house. So hence you have children, you need more rooms. And this is my frustration. I'm going to have a diatribe here. This is my frustration. And this is the one big pet peeve I had with Charlie Kirk and then the people coming out after him saying, have more kids than you can afford and sooner than you're ready for them. And I understand the concept that we're just not having enough children. I understand that concept, but here's my problem with it. When you tell people this, and then you also tell them they're wrong and wicked for having too big of houses and wanting too big of houses to house all the children you just told them to have.
bath or bath and a half. Square footage per person in American homes roughly doubled in the last 50 years. And that's before we count the things your parents never dreamt of. The internet, the phone in your pocket that costs more per month than their first car payment.
Okay, and I love this because he's not the first person to say this, and I wanted to point this out. And again, I'm going to go full screen. I looked it up, and I queried AI, and you have to be extremely careful how you query AI because AI will give you weird numbers depending on what you're doing. And this is what he got. He got a weird number, and they keep getting this number. Okay, so the median cost of a phone right now, a phone with service right now, and it's not the high cost because the high cost is $140 per month. The median cost is around $55 to $60 a month for a phone and service with insurance and everything like that included. Because most people, like it says, most people are using, and this is from government data, most people are using a family plan, or they're using their friend's family plan, or they're using some kind of discount service. Whereas back in the day, if you look at the records, and again, this is not you buying a car from your friend. If you're buying a car with a loan, if you look at the loan records from back in the 80s and 90s, the average cost for a loan back then per month was $180, and that's the median. That's the median. Throwing out the high, throwing out the low, and that's the median cost of a loan. And this is from loan data. So I understand if you have a personal difference, and if you're older and you think differently than this because your loan was cheaper, that's fine. You may have gotten a better deal than the average. You may have gotten a better deal than, whatever, because you did a personal thing. That's cool. But the numbers, you can't say what your parents paid for a car loan back then was cheaper. When you start doing adjusted for inflation, you're talking $600-700 versus the $60 phone, max $120 phone if you're crazy and on your own. So these numbers are not the same, and you cannot hold them the same. And I'll tell you why in a second, why you can't hold these numbers to be the same either.
The streaming. The median existing home in this country now sells for 5 times the median household income. 3 times was the old rule for affordable means.
That's a great point.
Through the entire 1990s, that number ran about 3.2.
So back in the 90s, which was like the peak time that everyone kind of remembers, and it's like this nostalgia, your cost of your house was 3.2 times what your annual income was. Now you look at doing that at 5 to 6, depending on, he says 5, but it's 5 to 6 depending on where you live at in the country because the houses are so expensive, even compared to incomes, but about 5.
The typical first-time buyer in America is now 40 years old. First-time buyers are 21% of all purchases. That is the lowest on record. Home ownership for households under 35 has fallen 37%. Half of all renters in America, that's 22.6 million households, spend more than 30% of their income just on housing.
Yes, I want to give you an idea of how expensive that is. For people that I know of to rent a house so they can have the 3 kids that they have or 2 kids that they have, or rent an apartment that they're having, that cost is somewhere around $4,000 to $5,000 a month, and that doesn't include the utilities.
That is also at
Again,
a
I live in
record.
California.
And it has broken that record 3 years running. Residential electricity up roughly a third since 2020, and it's going higher because we're building data centers faster than we are building the grid to feed them. And the transmission bill gets spread across everybody's meter, including yours, unless you put a stop to it in your own town and negotiate. So, first part of this, the young guy is right.
So I think I clipped the wrong part.
1963, there was a woman at the Social Security Administration named Molly Orkansky. She spent years at the agricultural department. She was a food economist, and she was pricing out what it cost to feed a family, blah, blah, blah. Washington asked her, figure out who in America was poor. Nobody had a number. There wasn't a number for poor in America. So she had one solid thing. She had the government's cheapest food plan, the emergency diet priced out by family size, the emergency diet. She had one survey from 1955 that said American families spend about a third of their income on food. So she took the cheapest grocery bill and multiplied it by 3. For a family of 4 in 1963, that came out to $3,100 a year. 6 years later, the federal government made that number official based on 1955. We still use it today. Every year since, we adjust it for nothing but inflation. So today, we spend 9.7% of income on food. Remember, that was 31% earlier, 9% now. The yardstick we use to measure of who's making it in this country is a 1955 grocery receipt.
So this is where he gets correct, and I thought this was interesting because I had heard this opinion and this mindset behind from specifically Ben Shapiro. And again, I listen to a lot of conservatives. But one thing he had said is, we are so much more affluent nowadays. Everything that we spend money on percentage-wise is so much less than what we used to do. And the problem that they get confused in is that when he makes that number, like what Glenn Beck said, is that was the cost of someone who was at the time, the 30% of their income was food, right? And then all they did for that number was they had changed that number that they had, and they'd say, well, this is how much it costs for food, and then they would increase that for percentage based off of inflation only. Nothing else to do with anything else. So then when you look at it and say, well, it's only 9% now, you guys are making a killing. And it's not even comparable. It's apples to oranges, because that's not at all what's happening, because you have every other cost, you have every other expenses that's not counted into that inflation, the cost of living increases that are insane compared to that. But they're looking at one number, and so because of that, they say, well, according to the government, you're making so much more money now comparatively, and you're doing so much better off.
Times 3. But everything that actually breaks a family now, the rent, the insurance, the child care, the car payment, the deductible, that was never in the number. That was a placeholder. She said so herself. So when the charts say Americans have never had it better, and you're standing in the grocery store doing your math in your head, some of that gap is not your imagination. It's the ruler that is wrong.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was trying to say. He does.
However, some of it is your imagination.
And this is where he gets off the rails.
And we can't dodge that if we want to fix our country. Here's the part that we don't understand. We are now a nation of wants and not a nation of needs.
And this is something that I think is very, very important, because we get a lot of boomers. We get a lot of older people who want to tell you what your needs and what your wants are, and why what your needs that you think are needs or you consider to be needs are actually just wants, because they think that it is a want, not a need. And so because of that, they make assessments based off of how much you're willing to spend on the things that you think are needs versus what they think are needs. Now, mind you, these same people enjoy the same thing that you think is a need and you know is a need, but they get to enjoy, and they think that's okay because they are now older and they have all the kinds of money in the world. And so because of that, it's a luxury for them, not realizing just how necessary those things are. Let's follow on.
That's not an insult. That's just a description. The trouble is when you can no longer tell the difference between want and need. I need a cell phone. I need an Apple cell phone. I need this subscription. No. A man who can't tell a want from a need can be sold anything, including his own freedom, by anyone promising him that want I'll give it to you for free.
Now, I thought was interesting. I wanted him to play that out because, again, I'm not a socialist one tiny bit. I've lived in Russia. I've seen what socialism does to these countries. That's not what I'm saying. What we have unfortunately a mixed bag where we spend so much garbage on things to hand out to people that don't deserve it that we end up messing up our whole entire economy by skewing everything in the weirdest ways. And there are ways of fixing that, but unfortunately, we've stopped a lot of those ways. Now, here's something that I thought was interesting when he talks about the cost of a cell phone, and he specifically says an Apple phone. And again, I understand, yes, you don't have to have an Apple phone. And for those of you that are out there that love, your Androids, which you're obviously messed up. But when he talks about that, and he talks about the fact that it's such a luxury to have, I want to remind you that nowadays you cannot function in society if you do not have a phone. It's not the same thing as what it used to be like when you had, even back in the day, if you didn't have a landline, it was considered weird. So it's a different goalpost now than what we had before. And so when you say that someone shouldn't have a cell phone, I need to remind some people what that cell phone means. If you have a phone, and I got my work phone, but if you have a cell phone, and what does it mean to have a cell phone, and what does it replace? And in fact, there's a whole video that I watched on it. It was a really, really good historian, and she was talking about how what we have in the phone and the cost that we have for the phone compared to all the different things that we used to have to pay for that were incredibly expensive that we don't have to do anymore, it blows your mind. And I'm just going to name a few things that you don't even necessarily think about every day that you use your phone for that our parents or even their parents' parents would have had to change and use all the time. Now, part of it is that we would have had a landline, okay? We would have had a landline, because you'd have to get a hold of someone. You had an answering machine, which is a totally different thing, that device that could break down and have problems, and you were special if you had it in some cases, which we automatically have with voicemail in here. How about a phone book or directory that you had to carry around and know the numbers, and you had to remember all that stuff? It's included. How about this? My dad used to buy Garmin's, back in the day for the GPS. We have a GPS in there. You don't need one. Or a paper map, which we'd spend money on, which weren't cheap, and you'd have to get updated all the time. How about this? You also have a camera on here. Remember back in the day when you had to buy cameras all the time, and you had to buy video recorders as well, because that was a totally different thing as well. You had a camera and then you had a camcorder. How about an alarm clock? When was the last time you went out and bought an actual alarm clock versus using the one that was on your phone? How about a calculator? When was the last time you bought a calculator instead of just using the one that you had on your phone? How about a calendar? You use the calendar on your phone. How about your address book? You use that from your phone. How about your MP3 player or your Victrola or your DVD player or any of those things? You get that from your phone as well. How about a flashlight? You carry on an everyday carry flashlight? You have it on your phone. How about a scanner fax machine? Because you can now take that picture from your phone, scan it into software, and you have that. You pay for a newspaper subscription? You probably still pay for it on this phone, but there are ways of getting them free. So now you can get a free newspaper to get news if you want to nowadays. How about Craigslist, job listings, those kind of things that you can get for free on your phone 90% of the time, okay? How about the times or the trips that you would take to the bank because you'd have to do business there, but you can do on your phone? How about paying bills and checking your mail and all that kind of stuff, because now most of the stuff doesn't come through there? How about your dictionary and your encyclopedia? How about your basic computer access that you have? Most people don't even need a computer because they can use their phone. So when we say that the phone is expensive, and I understand what he's saying, I get the idea. But to pretend that it's not a necessity in a world where everything is becoming more foreign oriented and you have AI coming in. If I have an employee coming into my job in my company and he doesn't have a phone, it doesn't do me much good. It doesn't help me much. The goalposts are different. And again, I've already talked about the cost per month for a phone. You can't compare the two together. And I want to make one final note. People of my age are renting an apartment. They can't get a house because now they have 2 kids. And even though they rent the apartment, they have a 2-bedroom apartment that they rent. For them to buy a house, it is so incredibly expensive that they cannot afford to do it. And Glenn, they are looking at the 1,600 square foot houses. They're not looking at the 2,100 square foot houses. And in fact, I've been looking, and when I go, I look at apartments or condos or those kind of things because I can't afford a standalone house. It's too incredibly expensive. And I'm talking about hour plus away from where I work trying to find a good house. Something that's not going to fall apart or that I had to invest too much money in because it's actually good for a first-time home buyer. Nothing extravagant. Nothing crazy. I'm not even looking for a yard. Some of them have like tiny little patios. And even that's barely maybe affordable. So saying that we should just deal with it because we're looking at the wrong size houses or we're looking at AC is wrong. But socialism is also wrong. And that is one area that he gets correct. How we fix this is a long-term strategy. And unfortunately, it hurts to say that because I'm in the market. I understand what that's like. But we can't tell people that what they're feeling is not true and not real, and that it's just because you want bigger and bad and better. We have to start meeting people where they're at and fixing their problems where they're at. And if that takes work, then do the work that it takes. If that makes us lose a few elections in these areas and that area so that we can actually win the ultimate battle, then fine. But you got to understand, I get very frustrated with conservatives who are playing the short game and picking on Lindsay Clancy for, having a mental problem, or not even picking on her because we all know she had a mental problem and potentially killed her kids, whatever. We understand the biggest losers in that whole situation and the biggest sufferers were the children. I understand that. But they pick on these things and they choose the worst battles to fight. Whether or not you can afford a house, or whether or not, women have mental problems, or like I talked about recently with the whole men not having places of work because we've been kicking them out. Like, let's focus on making everyone's day life better, making the economy better in such a way that we can be useful, and it will be beneficial. Because we keep losing these battles and because we can't make up our minds what our policies are. And I'm sorry, but Trump sometimes gets very confused. Like the whole thing we're fighting now with Canada with. I don't know if it's positive or not, but no one knows because he never makes it clear. It's a frustration. But because of that, when the socialists of America say, we'll give you something, it sounds really good to the people. And that's sad. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate all the subscriptions, man. It's just blown up. It's got 100 more subscribers than I had last week. Actually, more than that. It's crazy, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And really does help. So keep spreading the word. Just trying to give a balanced take and just say there is real consequences to what we face and deal with. And can we please make our messaging correct?